The desert prison. What was Alexander the Great of ancient Greece, 330 BC, looking for in the Taklamakan desert of China? He went there with his 30,000 warriors and he lost a third of them, over 10,000. Much has been said about Alexander the Great's campaign as a whole, and more specifically about the part that took place in Central Asia, more specifically this part that took place in the Taklamakan desert. What was the real goal when he dared to cross one of the harshest deserts on the planet? According to many, the harshest. What was it that led him to overcome all obstacles and defy the most adverse conditions to make this journey? One could say that it was madness and an attempt to prove his military worth, but he had already done this too many times before. One more time would not have offered him anything. So the question of what led him to this venture remains unanswered, or is it not? Before we proceed to investigate the real purpose of this expedition, let's talk a little about the nature of this particular desert. The Taklamakan Desert, located in the Chinese autonomous province of Xinjiang, Uyghur. In the north, it reaches the Tarim River at the foot of the Tian Shan mountain range, and in the south, it reaches the Kunlun Mountains. It's a typical example of a cold desert, as it receives very cold air masses from Siberia, which lower the temperature to very low levels. Sometimes they reach values below 20 degrees below Celsius. And due to this location, right in the heart of Asia, and the thousands of kilometers away from any water source, it presents very cold nights, even in summer. In other words, it's practically impassable for any human. This is the reality of the Taklamakan Desert, and of course, it is particularly harsh. So was it logical for such an intelligent general to lead his army to face such adverse conditions if there was no higher purpose? If he had no order from somewhere to carry out such a mission, would he have done it? Obviously not. But what could have been the mission that the great general, Alexander the Great, had that led him to these actions and faced so many dangers? Was it a mission that was assigned during the campaign, or had he been trained since childhood for some purpose? And the writer says, I believe, like many fellow Greeks, that they were preparing for a sacred purpose, for a mission that had as its ultimate goal the salvation of planet Earth and the restoration of order and proper function on it. Let's remember that in the Old Testament of the Holy Bible, the book of Daniel, the Archangel Gabriel appeared to the prophet Daniel and talked about the coming of the young king from northern Greece who would put an end to the Persians. He would only reign for 10 years, and that his kingdom would be separated into four and not given to his heirs. That's exactly what happened. Now, Alexander the Great's campaign in Taklamakan took place around the year 236 BC, when he had completed the conquest of the Persian Empire and was advancing towards Central Asia. Ancient writers report that he had great difficulty subduing the wild tribes of the region, and it took him a long time to achieve this. Perhaps with these reports, they are actually trying to conceal the fact of the campaign. They were then in the province of Bactria, and following a course parallel to the Oxus River, he reached the edge of the desert. Essentially, he followed the course of the first expeditionary corps of Dionysus, who had first carried out a similar campaign about 2,000 years before Alexander the Great. He passed through the same difficult paths to enter the province of Xinjiang, which is dominated by the desert. We derive information about this event from ancient texts that allude to what happened. Also, references to people with white or fiery blonde hair are found in some Chinese myths. And since we're talking about myths, the myth always hides nuggets of very old truth. The references to such people concern the most ancient times of Chinese history, and therefore match the times of the Dionysian campaign. The proof that this campaign took place is given to us today by the findings that are constantly coming to light from the excavations that are taking place in the area. These excavations efforts have revealed ruins of entire cities, which are built with an ancient Greek street plan. Let's remember they have even found ancient Greek open theaters in China, which are in excellent condition. There are foundations of buildings with ancient Greek construction, with an inner courtyard and a special space for the central hearth, the fireplace of the house. The most important findings, however, were not the buildings, but the mummies found in the dozens of tombs in the area. There were many mummies that were thousands of years old, perfectly preserved by the drought of the desert, and the most paradoxical thing, the mummies did not look like Chinese. The mummified bodies belonged to tall, red-haired, and light-eyed people. Obviously, the dead were not Chinese. The oldest ones dated back to the 19th and 18th century BC, and the most recent ones to around the 4th century BC. Among the bodies were a baby who had blue stones in place of his eyes, and some women who wore pointed hats like the Amazons. So who were these people? And how did they live in such arid regions? The second question is answered based on geological observations, which explain the possibility that the desert was once a fertile valley due to the altitude difference from sea level. But what about the people? The findings of the DNA research proved that the mummies did not belong to the Chinese or any other people of the region, such as the Uyghur Turks. They showed that they come from people of ancient Scythia or the Eastern Mediterranean. But here there is another element that demonstrates the Greekness of findings, thus excluding Scythians and other people of Eastern Mediterranean, and therefore the passage of Alexander the Great through there. Archaeologists report that the designs of the clothes of the dead have ancient Greek motifs. In particular, an engraved symbol on a tomb is the ancient Greek symbol of the swastika. Is it true that the Greeks passed through that region, and if so, what were they looking for in such a desert? The existence of cities with Greek architecture, and even more, the discovery of the dead with Greek elements, prove that the Greeks did not simply pass through there, but made a permanent settlement. And what is the reason for such an act in this region, if there is no specific purpose and specific role that those who would settle there should play? Could it be that these cities were fortresses and outposts, and the people were guardians of some secret? What was the secret that led the great general Alexander the Great to carry out this part of his campaign? These questions lead us back to the school of Mieza and the teachings of Aristotle to his famous student. I wonder what information he conveyed to him about the old campaigns of the Greeks and what Dionysus was looking for at the time. What did he tell him about the secrets that the desert hid, and what instructions did he give him to get there? He must also have given him instructions on what to do when he got there, and this is easily explained by the existence of the prison cities. It's certain that he told him about the campaign of Dionysus and suggested this route as the fastest to approach the desert. The campaign of Dionysus can be proven, despite those scholars who consider it a figment of their imagination, by the existence of dead people with an age of almost 4,000 years ago among the mummies discovered in the Taklamakan desert. Their age is close to that of the chronology mentioned by ancient literature as the probable date for the campaign of Dionysus. So a first conclusion that can be drawn from the above evidence is that Alexander the Great undertook this part of his campaign to inspect the works left by Dionysus and to enforce them with his own where necessary. The most difficult point is to identify the reason for the creation of these works, what need led to the construction of cities in the middle of the desert, and to man them with capable personnel ready to fight. It will be difficult to know what exactly these guards protected or what exactly prevented them from escaping from this area. It is logical for someone to think that such a harsh area in which someone builds outposts and fortresses plays a role of a type of prison and has very special and dangerous prisoners inside it. But what did the desert prison hide inside? We may never know for sure, but Aristotle had certainly told Alexander the Great, and this gave him the amazing momentum he displayed during his campaign. It becomes clear then that the Taklamakan desert hides many and dangerous secrets, The evidence that comes to light reveals historical events that seem capable of overturning established positions on the history of the region and perhaps world history. Campaigns and settlements of populations in times older than previously believed, and which were carried out by people with a high spiritual level. Peoples who were unrelated in appearance to the native and neither in their customs and traditions. And finally, the central point in all of this are the Greeks and their actions led by Alexander the Great and Dionysius 2,000 years before him. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.